Shadow of the Erdtree brings a lot of new lore to Elden Ring. We get to meet the boss baby face to face. Marika's origin is revealed, and we get to sip the brain damage juice that gives you brain damage. The biggest revelation is that Mohg probably isn't really that weird. However, this egg thing is, and all we need to do is reach out and touch it. Okay, so now that we have touched the weird egg thing, and we are in the realm of Shadow, what exactly is the realm of Shadow? It's not a parallel universe, and we haven't traveled back in time like with Ulyssil. The realm of Shadow is actually a part of the lands between that was sealed away long ago. In fact, it was most likely cut right out of the center, which explains that weirdly shaped interior ocean. It being sealed away also explains the veil we can see over it. The realm of Shadow is being concealed. It is being hidden. But why? Did Marika recognize how terrible that Commander Gaius boss fight was? Maybe. What's more likely is that it was done to conceal her past and the source of her divinity. It turns out Marika's tragic backstory is war crimes. She loves the stuff. She is down to clown. Marika doesn't even care who she victimizes. She is purely in this for love of the game. Marika is a true politician. This time her victims are the Hornsent. Now there is a guy called Hornsent, but the culture he belongs to is also called the Hornsent. It's kind of like naming your kid America or India. Just go with it. This culture predates Marika and the Erdtree. They mainly inhabit Bellerat, but you can also find them all over the realm of Shadow, some of them more alive than others. They are the origin of the Omen curse. In their culture, it's actually perceived as a good thing. It means they are saints. This definitely recontextualizes some characters in the base game. The Hornsent did not have anything to do with the outer gods. Unlike most of the cultures in the base game, the Hornsent were more focused on cultivating their own divinity through being very annoying, and also the Gate of Divinity. We don't know too much about it, but the Hornsent did construct it, most likely through a massive sacrifice, and it's safe to assume that it can grant people divine powers. Going by what we see in the story trailer and what Miquella attempts to do in game, you might assume the existence of this gate is why Marika tried to destroy the Hornsent. That's only somewhat correct. Marika sent a massive army into the realm of Shadow, with the goal of destroying all of the Hornsent. However, having her name attached to these war crimes would harm her political career. This is where Marika's genius idea came into play. Why not force her son with terrible debilitating spine issues to commit these awful crimes? The spine issues that she may have caused by sealing a giant serpent into his body. Yeah, maybe Marika is actually kind of terrible, but don't worry, Messmer's life isn't all that bad. He has a bootleg Renala as a girlfriend. Relana followed him all the way to the realm of Shadow, so either she really likes Messmer and his serpent, or she really likes war crimes. Yeah, it's definitely both of those. Marika was actually kind of embarrassed by how Messmer was so much better at war crimes than her, so she sealed away the entire realm of Shadow from the lands between, partially to scrub everything there from history, but also partially to contain Messmer. If you read the description of Messmer's kindling, it says, Messmer, much like his younger sister, bore a vision of fire. This pretty much confirms Melina's true identity as a child of Marika. In the base game, she literally burns down the Erdtree, but what's interesting is that it says Messmer also shared this vision. Marika realized he might one day try to burn the Erdtree, so she sent him to do her dirty work, and then sealed him away so he could never return to the Erdtree. Furthermore, the description also states that the kindling was eaten away at by a wicked serpent. Does this mean Marika intentionally imprisoned the serpent in Messmer, knowing it would completely destroy his spine and weaken his flame, so he couldn't prolong the Age of Fire? Wait, wrong franchise. So he couldn't burn down her houseplant. Marika is such a cooked parent, literally. Now you may be wondering why Marika did all of this. Why did she send Messmer and his army to kill all of the Hornsent? Well, at a place called the Whipping Hut, you can find a Hornsent ghost. If you talk to them, they mention stuffing shaman into jars. jars. These are the exact same shaman that had Jason Statham dancing in their music video. The Hornsent were punishing them for this music video by stuffing them into the jars in an extremely terrible ritual. But how exactly does this relate to Marika? Well, later in the DLC, you will stumble across this interesting area called Shaman Village. It plays a unique, beautiful track. There are no NPCs or enemies here, but there is a small glowing tree. It gives you an incantation, which says, Marika bathed the village of her home in gold, knowing full well that there was no one to heal. Yes, this confirms that Marika was a member of the 80s psychedelic band The Shaman. It also explains why Marika destroyed the Hornsent. She was avenging her band. There is one more item that can be found here, in front of a statue of a woman. It is a braid of Marika's hair. The description reads, a braid of golden hair cut loose. Queen Marika's offering to the grandmother. Boosts holy damage negation by the utmost. Did they seriously interrupt this prepare to cry description with a stat boost? What was her prayer, her wish, her confession? There is no one left to answer, and Marika never returned home again. Now that's what I call prepare to cry. Marika is the only survivor of the shaman. All of the other members of the band were stuffed into jars by the Hornsent, so she left her past behind and became a god. While Marika's people were being made extinct, she used the Gate of Divinity to ascend to godhood, most likely with help from the outer god that is the Greater Will. She created the Golden Order, destroyed the Hornsent, and became the Marika that we learnt about in Elden Ring. It's not entirely clear what the grandmother is. I assume that it is merely the leader of the shaman, like a village elder or a vocalist. I believe this because narratively it would mirror the tribal culture of the ancestral followers over in Shifa River. They are one of the oldest cultures in the lands between, and were basically paved over by the Eternal Cities and maybe even the Golden Order. I believe Marika's culture was of a similar religious structure, in that it was not influenced by the outer gods, that it was something purely natural and native to the world of Elden Ring, which adds a sense of poetic irony when you consider that Marika ended up becoming the slave of an outer god and created her golden order on top of a culture potentially much like her own. Alternatively, the grandmother could be some kind of god, whether that be an outer god or something else. Personally, I don't think this is the case, because that would not be very thematically interesting. I know From Software is better than that. It's worth considering that the Hornsent might have done more than just stuff the shaman into jars. It's possible they also sacrificed them to construct the Gate of Divinity. It makes sense to construct a divine gate out of divine people. However, there isn't anything that confirms this. They could have also just used their own people. This also draws some parallels to the Eternal Cities. You will notice that the gate actually looks similar to the weird statues you can find in the Eternal Cities. We know that the Eternal Cities were trying to make their own god, and that they were destroyed by the Greater Will for doing so. This suddenly makes a lot more sense, now that we know that they might have been achieving godhood in the exact same way Marika did. They naturally would have posed quite a significant threat to her and the Greater Will. Now that we know about the history of the Realm of Shadow and why Marika chose to conceal it, we can talk about why the boss baby decided to come here. Miquella has his own vision for the lands between, much like Goldmask, Fia, Rani, and the Loathsome Dung Eater had. Miquella's vision was that of an age of compassion, which actually sounds a whole lot better than the Dung Eater's random poo world. Naturally, an age of compassion attracted a lot of followers who wanted to see Miquella succeed. These are the NPCs you meet throughout the DLC. You might even notice that one of them is Hornsent, a member of the very culture that Marika erased. So why on earth is this guy helping Marika's own child exploit the Gate of Divinity that his people created? Well, as we find out, maybe Miquella isn't actually a good person. In order to become the perfect god that would bring about the perfect age of compassion, Miquella divests himself of all the parts that would get in the way of it. He gets rid of his body, so he isn't tainted by his physical needs. He gives up his Harvard degree, meaning he is no longer the boss baby. Eventually, this leads to him divesting himself of his great rune, and this is where it gets interesting. It turns out Miquella's power isn't being kawaii. It's mind controlling people to think he he is kawaii. All of the NPCs you have met in the DLC have been mind-controlled to serve Miquella. This explains why Hornsent was serving him. Now that the curse is broken, some NPCs decide to pursue their own quests, like Fiolier trying to find the evil dentist so he can get hopped up on some of that bad stuff. Or Hornsent going someplace to yell at some guy. However, there are actually some NPCs who are still interested in serving him, Leda being the main one. They still believe in bringing about Miquella's Age of Compassion, which sounds all nice and good. However, now we know that Miquella's power is the power of mind control. This recontextualizes his Age of Compassion. It sounds a lot like the boss baby intends on removing free will from the world. So everybody is happy and safe but completely unable to make choices for themselves, unable to truly live, because life involves making a lot of mistakes, like installing Valorant, but then learning from these mistakes and making better choices, like uninstalling Valorant. In Miquella's world, people would be unable to learn and grow. It would just be a stagnant but safe existence, like playing Valorant. It would also mean that we would be unable to become Elden Lord and rule over it, which is a lot more important, because it must feel great sitting in that chair, even if you are ushering in an Age of Dung. So in the spirit of ushering in an Age of Dung, we must face Miquella in somewhat honorable combat. I say somewhat because we don't actually fight the boss baby, we fight Radahn, and also in a roundabout way, Mohg, who might actually be a bit of a victim in this whole situation. Of course, he still rules over a weird demonic blood realm, infected my people with terrible diseases, and manufactured ultimate pigeon weapons, but he didn't actually worship Miquella to an incredibly concerning degree, because Miquella mind-controlled Mohg into worshipping him. Yeah, it turns out maybe Mohg isn't as weird as we thought. I believe that before this, Mohg behaved like a normal demigod. He ruled over his loyal followers and fought pointless wars for pointless power. Eventually, when the shattering happened, he wanted to become Elden Lord. In order to do that, he needed an Empyrean. It just so happens Miquella is physically the weakest Empyrean, and therefore the easiest to capture and control. When Malenia left the Halig Tree to fight Radahn, Mohg slipped in, fought through Miquella's protectors, and kidnapped Miquella, solely to use the boss baby as a tool to help himself rule over the lands between. He was not obsessed with Miquella at this point, but Miquella saw an opportunity here. You see, with the Halig Tree, Miquella was basically trying to create a land of compassion, a place where persecuted peoples like the Albinaurics could come and live in safety. A very noble mission. However, it turns out Miquella sucks at growing trees. You can't just nurture a plant with love, care, and copious amounts of the worst poison known to mankind. Miquella, I know you think your sister is great, but she's gotta go, man. She has just spread this disgusting scarlet rot all over your perfect paradise, completely killing the tree. So considering how Miquella's land of compassion had fallen to pieces, he had to pivot, and this is where Mohg came in. Miquella realized that if he mind-controlled Mohg, he could use Mohg to ascend himself to godhood, and rather than create a land of compassion, he could usher in an Age of Compassion through the realm of shadow. So that's exactly what the boss baby did. From Mohg's mausoleum, Miquella cocooned himself as a way to travel to the realm of shadow, while Mohg was mind-controlled to obsessively defend and serve him. Mohg's closest servants were also mind-controlled to serve Miquella, as can be seen with Ansbach, who is actually incredibly normal and not weird at all, which provides an interesting contrast to another servant of Mohg, Vare, who is actually incredibly weird and not normal at all. This makes me think that maybe Miquella's mind control of Mohg is responsible for how evil his faction became. Considering that Miquella's cocoon leaks blood, it's possible that a massive blood sacrifice was required to transport him to the realm of shadow, resulting in people like Vare, who is early 2010's anime level of edgy, joining them and helping helping them harvest that blood through evil deeds. Ansbach simply does not feel like he belongs to the same faction as Vare, so it would make sense if Vare represents a more corrupted version of Mohg's followers. Mohg's region is also filled with Albinaurics infected with his blood curse, serving him in a way that feels like they are being mind controlled. In Liurnia, you can find them staring at one of Mohg's recruitment centers, as if they are entranced. Could Miquella have potentially infused Mohg's blood curse with the ability to mind control them? Maybe there was no blood curse and the whole time it was just Miquella mind controlling his victims. We can't really say, however it doesn't really matter, because ultimately Miquella is taking advantage of the same Albinaurics he aimed to protect by constructing the Halig tree. At this point in the story, he hasn't even abandoned any of the good parts of himself, and yet he is still cruelly exploiting the Albinaurics. Timeline-wise, this is the first hint we get that maybe Miquella isn't the good guy, and that maybe his Age of Compassion won't be such a great thing. Now that we know how Mohg fits into this, we can understand how Radahn fits into this. The mind-controlled Mohg was under the impression that he would be Miquella's consort. That's sort of true, because the Radahn we fight is actually Radahn possessing Mohg's body. You can see Mohg's omen horns on Radahn's arms. Ansbach also just straight up tells us. It turns out when Malenia and Radahn were filming their appearances in the story trailer, Malenia whispered something to Radahn. Miquella awaits thee, O promised consort. Yeah, she actually sounded like that. Weird, I know. Anyway, the reason she said that was because at some point in the past, Radahn had promised to be Miquella's consort. The ending cutscene shows Miquella praying to Radahn. He says that if they honor their part of the vow, he wants Radahn to promise to be his consort. And then the DLC ends and you immediately think, is that really the ending? Yes, it is. Miquella's part of the vow isn't spelled out anywhere in the game. However, when you think about what Radahn could possibly want, it is endless battle. Redmane Freya even tells us this. That's why she doesn't care about Miquella reviving him. So in exchange for Radahn becoming Miquella's consort, Miquella would provide him with endless battle as they enforce their Age of Compassion. Isn't that really weird? An Age of Compassion born from endless battle. I guess that's the promise most leaders in real life make. So maybe it's not so strange. However, now a new question stands. Why did Malenia go to war with Radahn if they were on the same team? There really isn't a clear answer to this. But if Miquella did promise Radahn endless battle, maybe Radahn understood that eventually once they had succeeded in creating an Age of Compassion, there wouldn't really be anyone left to fight. So he just decided against it and kept waging war in the lands between. Therefore Malenia went to kindly remind him of his promise by Scarlet Rot nuking every soul in Caelid. As a result, Radahn became a mindless beast. Then eventually we came along and completely destroyed him with the power of friendship. His death meant that his soul was now free to be resurrected and put into Mohg's body. After we compromised Mohg to a permanent end, of course. So now Miquella could force Radahn into becoming his consort by resurrecting him. And this time Radahn could not do anything to stop it. This explains why Radahn doesn't have any dialogue during the fight. At first you might be disappointed, but it makes sense, because he is basically a brain-dead mind-controlled zombie in the body of another dude. We are fighting the equivalent of a buff quarterback who has gotten a CTE from being knocked in the head a few too many times. This is the true prepare to cry. Now there is still one more loose thread. What is up with that lean merchant, the one that has enraptured Theolier? This is St Trina. Before the release of the DLC, there were hints that St Trina was actually Miquella in disguise. St Trina was a mysterious figure who had their own religious following. They were a compassionate individual, closely associated with sleeping, hence the lean. In the DLC, this connection to Miquella is confirmed, as we can find St Trina at the bottom of a really disgusting goopy cave. In his pursuit of divinity, St Trina is yet another part of himself that Miquella cast off. This is where the true prepare to cry begins. If you repeatedly drink St Trina's nectar, you die instantly. but also go on a bit of a vision quest and hear St Trina's voice. It urges you to kill Miquella to stop him from becoming a caged divinity. St Trina knows that by discarding every part of himself that makes him Miquella the Kind, Miquella would be unable to truly oversee an age of compassion. In the end, St Trina realizes that Miquella would become just like Marika, a husk trapped by their own godhood, unable to truly change anything for the better, waiting to eventually be usurped by some troglodyte-looking guy. He gave up every part of himself to achieve a goal that was impossible from the outset, and now the one small part of himself that cautioned him against it rots at the bottom of a pit. This forms an interesting parallel to the Greater Will's situation. It too has a cast-off part of itself rotting in a pit. It's called Metyr. At first you might expect Metyr to simply be a servant of the Greater Will, and this is somewhat true. However, upon defeating them and taking a look at their remembrance, it is revealed that they are the force behind the two fingers, and an extension of the Greater Will. But furthermore, it is also revealed that they are completely cut off from the Greater Will. This means that throughout our playthrough, what we assumed was the Greater Will was actually just some so-called Mother of Fingers. The actual Greater Will has long since moved on from our world, leaving Metyr behind to aimlessly manipulate the inhabitants of the lands between, with no particular goal in mind. It is effectively an institution of subjugation solely propped up by the fact that it already exists, cultivating various lords and divinities to rule through rather than over. It is completely self-perpetuating. All endings except for Rani's and the Frenzied Flame show you using a mending rune to repair the Elden Ring, which is just you encoding your being and will into the pre-existing structures overseen by the institution, and effectively becoming just another cog in the machine, completely subsumed by an ancient cycle. This is much more interesting than the idea of some supreme being consciously ruling over it. It draws many parallels to real-life politics, such as modern political disaffection and hopelessness. It's no mistake that one of the alternate endings literally involves you burning it all down, while the other shows Rani completely reforming the system. At this point, you might realize this is basically how every Dark Souls game ends. You either prolong the collapsing situation, or you end it and hope something better takes its place. This is why an ending where you side with Miquella could have subverted the themes of the game in an interesting way. It would have been like the normal Elden Lord endings where you continue the current cycle. However, because of Miquella's mind control, it could be assumed that his age of stagnancy would continue indefinitely, and no one would be able to rise up against him. The world would be stuck in an endless purgatory, forever trapped within Metyr's aimless system. A truly depressing forever conclusion. Now on the other hand, if you wanted to side with the Hornsent and get a Hornsent ending, you can actually do that. The Dung Eater really liked the Omen Curse, and as we now know from information in the DLC, it was perceived as a symbol of divinity amongst the Hornsent. So by ushering in an age of the Omen Curse and inflicting everyone with it, you are basically blessing everyone with divinity, which also explains why the Dung Eater yells "bless you" when you fight him. That has to be generational foreshadowing. From Software have done it again. His entire character and quest have been completely recontextualized by the DLC. Of course, he is still a terrible murderer that eats dung, but depending on how you see it, his ending might actually be creating a utopian Hornsent society. The only reason the Omen Curse was reviled to begin with was because Marika really hated the Hornsent for what they did to her people, so she naturally persecuted anyone who grew the horns that they worshipped. Of course, this backfired when her two sons ended up becoming omens, and because she is a great mother, she just locked them away from the world. So if you want to apologize to Mohg for slandering him based on actions he took while under the influence, maybe consider getting the Dung Eater ending. It turns out we didn't get a DLC based on Godwyn, the Glow-Eyed Queen, or even Miquella. It was based on the Dung Eater, the main character of Elden Ring. If you enjoyed this video, you should subscribe to my channel. It would look great on your resume.